All right. Good morning, viewers. Welcome to the new installment of my new program called Meet the Press with LOVEJOY. On this program, we talk about anything and everything. We invite everyone from everywhere. But on this first program, I'm honored to have Solomon Bobosibunu. Mr. Solo, you are actually blessed to be my first guest. And I'm happy to have you on this show.
Thank you, LOVEJOY. Thank you, 263 Chat. My name is Solomon Bobosibunu with the Election Resource Center.
All right. So the topic for today is how legal is it to suspend the by-elections? So maybe just a brief about what happened. The Vice President, who's also the Health Minister, Consultations recently announced that by-elections will be suspended until we are done with COVID lockdown. And this was through a Statutory Instrument 225 of 225A of 2020. Right. From a legal point of view, Mr. Solo, maybe you can take us through. Is this legal?
Okay, LOVEJOY, to be precise, in terms of the pronouncement by the Minister of Health, the Election Resource Center actually produced a legal opinion that looked into the legality of the suspension, the indefinite, actually he called it indefinite, until the COVID-19 is no longer with us. So at that particular point in time, there are quite a number of issues in terms of the legal perspective, not necessarily just our own street talk, but in terms of what the Constitution of Zimbabwe say, what the laws that provides for elections are concerned. So in that regard, the suspension in itself, it is the position of the ERC that the suspension is illegal. It doesn't stand in terms of the law.
All right. We are looking at the Minister of Health or the Minister of Health having done this, probably in consultation with Cabinet. But we also have the Electoral Act, we have the Constitution, and then we have got the SI unit. Which one now supersedes the other? Okay.
Thank you for that particular question. So if you look at the statutory instrument, the effect is that it will suspend the holding of by-elections to fill all the particular vacancies. It might be parliament, it might be local authorities, those election-related activities that will get into different communities. So as far as the statutory instrument is concerned, it cannot supersede the Constitution of Zimbabwe, because when you read Section 2 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which speaks about the supremacy of the Constitution, it is very clear that any action, any practice that is not in tandem with the provisions of the Constitution, that particular section, that particular statutory instrument, that particular practice at that point is now and void at law. So in this regard, the statutory instrument that was pronounced is actually illegal in terms of the laws of Zimbabwe. So it cannot supersede the Constitution, because there are provisions within the Constitution that speaks to a number of issues that have been infringed by the statutory instrument. So probably I would also quickly go to Section 235 of the Constitution, which is in Chapter 12, because ZEC, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, falls under institutions that supports democracy in Zimbabwe. So ZEC is an independent institution. It simply means, simply put, without necessarily even going into the, if it's an independent institution, it means it is not under the control of anyone. That particular section is in the Constitution under Section 235 of the Constitution. So in that regard, ZEC's administration, ZEC's activities cannot be suspended or banned by an individual, by an institution. And within the Constitution of Zimbabwe, it simply says even the executive itself cannot interfere with the functions of independent commissions. So in this regard, a minister, a cabinet minister, a vice president, the president, those are executives in terms of the system of governance. So in this regard, they cannot interfere, they are barred from interfering with the functions of an independent commission. This can be the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, this can be the Electoral Commission, this can be the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, this can be the Zimbabwe Media Commission. The executive cannot interfere. That is the effect of 235 on the statutory instrument.
All right, but then you're saying that they cannot, but they have. They've actually done that. And for a long time, we've had this whole thing that the executive interferes in ZEC, the executive interferes in the Media Commission, in Chapter 12 commissions. But now we are specifically talking about elections, and they've done that. So what are the implications on the independence of ZEC?
Okay, so the implications are very clear. You will see that the affected institution, in that regard, it will probably be subdued. It will not be able to perform its own functions. And citizens can go to that particular institution and demand that we want you to act according to the mandate that we gave you through the Constitution. Because this is the only instrument that we have as citizens. This is the instrument that is provided to us. Because in a democracy, there are supposed to be systems, there are supposed to be procedures, there are supposed to be institutions. So in that regard, we, in line with good governance, the institutions that are created by the Constitution must operate according to the procedures that are found within the Constitution. So, for example, the executive has its own functions. If Parliament, for instance, gets into the way of the executive, it would be actually a bad practice in terms of good governance. So in this way, we have seen it happening. ZEC on its own, the Electoral Commission on its own, could have gone to court and say, okay, due to COVID, we might not be able to proceed with by-elections. So we are seeking probably a provisional order to say for the next 3-4 months, we have suspended by-elections. It's possible. They could have done that, gone to court, because the court is there to then sit down and say, okay, is this justifiable? Because these are rights. We are dealing with rights. These are political rights. Rights to representation, rights to participation in the governance of the country. So in that way, Section 67, which gives someone, an individual, the right to participate in electing their own leaders, is suspended. Is that lawful? So that suspension was supposed to be probably coming from the courts, a court order to say, okay, we have given you 30 days to suspend the by-elections, but after 30 days, proceed with the elections, because what we have actually presented in court is justifiable. So in this way, the statutory instrument purports to suspend provisions that are fundamental, the provisions that are very foundational. Because when you look at 235 and when you look at 239, the functions of ZEC, those are foundations of the Electoral Commission itself. Hence, the statutory instrument is simply going to attack that particular foundation. It's going to destroy, to separate that particular foundation. Hence, the institution itself cannot then function and then cannot provide for what it's supposed to do as an independent institution.
That's very interesting. Now, we've got the government coming in and saying that we are suspending by-elections because of COVID. But I think, let me take you back a few months ago. The same government was clamoring for constitutional amendment number 2 hearings, right? So what does this say about the intentions of the government with regards to elections? Okay, so we don't necessarily see sincerity in terms of the decision to suspend by-election, because we want a government that respects the law, because they should be bound by the Constitution. So the call to have those the amendments and even those activities says a lot. If we were in a position
to conduct public hearings when COVID was at its peak. People were in Marondera, people were in Chinoi, people were in Harare, people were in Blawayo, people were in Kadoma, doing activities, parliamentary activities. And in this regard, you are simply suspending activities that can actually be managed by the Electoral Commission. So I'll probably try to drive you towards what ZEC did in terms of when it knew that it is supposed to prepare for elections and ensure that its mandate is fulfilled. When you look at the policies that they've developed, they did a stakeholder engagement, consultations, where they were getting input from the stakeholders in relation to how they were going to manage elections under COVID. And this is what has been happening in other countries. They've developed policies. They've developed, if you read this policy by ZEC, I'll probably go through it. Regular elections are fundamental to proper functioning of representative democracy. This is important. To ensuring that the constitutional right to elections is not curtailed. If there is a policy by the Electoral Commission which recognizes that elections cannot be suspended indefinitely, a statutory instrument cannot come in and then override that. So these are the contradictions that we're actually seeing. So you spoke about Constitutional Amendment Bill number 2. There is a contradiction. In June and July, we were at our peak in terms of those numbers, the COVID numbers, the infection numbers in the country and anywhere else. And now, when the numbers are simply going down, we find ourselves with a statutory instrument that says elections are banned indefinitely. So these are the contradictions that we're actually seeing in terms of the amendment bill number 2 and the statutory instrument, as well as the policy by the Electoral Commission itself. So they were prepared to handle elections in COVID because they said elections cannot be suspended. This right cannot be suspended indefinitely. So in that way, they're acknowledging that we have to live with this COVID, but we have to still fulfill the mandate of the commission that is provided for by the Constitution. So I think this was an important step, and there is a misstep in terms of the statutory instrument that is suspending the by-elections.
Okay, talking about procedures and consultations, who was consulted by ZEC? Were you part, as ERC, were you part of the consultations? And what was the agreement amongst the stakeholders who were there?
Okay, thank you for that particular question, Lovejoy. So I think the consultations, I think it was at the peak, during the peak of the COVID. ZEC distributed widely. I think I saw it on my Facebook, I saw it on organizational Facebook, on Twitter and everywhere else, where they were consulting and saying, okay, if you have an intervention, if you have an idea, if you have suggestions on how the commission should conduct itself, should actually, in terms of the contribution into the policy, the COVID policy, so that you can operationalize the elections during COVID. So they consulted widely. I think even political parties got that. The organizations that work for with different mandates also were part of that. So in that regard, those consultations were important.
Okay, we seem to be having network challenges with Solo there. All right, well, let's we're trying to connect back to Solo. This is what Dr. Alex Magaisa said in his Big Saturday read the other day. He said the ban to the by-election ban is meant to stifle democratic principles, and we are looking at a situation where we are supposed to be electing about 35 parliamentarians and 165 councillors in 165 wards. So what brought about this whole the by-elections is we've had, I think, about 3 or 4 members of parliament we have died, and we've had recalls from the MDC led by Dr. Thokozani Kupe, who is recalling MDC alliance members whom she says are no longer part of the MDC. I think we've lost Solo there. We'll try to get back to him, but that's long and short of it. And some of the things that constitutional law experts like Dr. Magaisa have said is that the statutory instrument 225, effectively banning by-elections in Zimbabwe, is living proof of it. And I'm quoting from his Twitter. President Emerson Mnangagwa is lifting restrictions in other areas, but not in elections. But the legality of this statutory instrument is doubtful. It seeks to amend not only the Electoral Act, but also the Constitution. I think this is what Solo was also arguing about. The health minister does not have power to do that. Secondary, the statutory instrument cannot operate retrospectively as it seeks to do so. It is very clumsy. Okay, so under Zimbabwe's electoral laws, a country, a party can recall legislators or councillors if they no longer represent the interests of their party. And this is why we are here. This is why we are supposed to be holding the by-elections. One of the things that Solomon was talking about was that there were consultations that were done by ZEC in regards to how they were supposed to move forward. But it looks like all the submissions from the consultations did not were not taken into consideration when Vice President Chiwenga announced his suspension. Okay. Also, another thing that we can also talk about is, it's not only Zimbabwe that is supposed to be holding elections. We look at countries like Ghana, Benin, even Malawi. They've held elections under COVID conditions. And you look at the United States of America, they're actually preparing for their elections on 3 November. So this is my opinion. This is my opinion. I don't think banning elections or suspending them is actually the way to go, citing COVID restrictions. We have had a lot of things going on during COVID times. We've had rallies being held by the president, that's President Emerson Mnangagwa. We've had gatherings being done. So I don't think going forward we can say, we can give an excuse of not holding elections, right? Moving forward, I think the other thing that we can talk about is the whole fighting that's been happening within the MDC structures. And this is the reason why we're here. I don't know where we are going to end up, but if this continues, then that means we're going to likely have a lot of by-elections. And looking at what's been happening right now, I don't think we are going to have any MPs left in the House of Assembly. You have got ZANU-PF, which controls the 2/3 majority. That's about, I think, more than 160 MPs. And you have got the MDC, which is quite a smaller number. Now, 35 of their MPs are recalled, and it's just a sizable number that's left. So I don't know going forward what the standing rules will be for the parliament. I don't know if they can still have a quorum for them to continue holding parliamentary sittings. Okay, we're trying to connect to Solomon. I think he's back. Okay, he's having troubles with his network here. Okay, so the other thing that was said during this whole suspension of by-elections, that ZANU-PF is afraid of holding elections because they know that they will lose. But this is just a public opinion. We cannot substantiate that claim. It's just an opinion that came through. Okay. If Mnangagwa wants to establish a state of emergency in which electoral activity is banned and rules by decree, then he must follow the appropriate constitutional procedures. This is one of the comments from Dr. Magaisa's Big Saturday read. It's a really pregnant read from Dr. Magaisa. I'll try to probably talk about. He talks about vengeful politics, and I quote: "What is on shore is a classic case of vengeful politics. Chamisa and the MDC Alliance rejection of Poland hating Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF. The protest by MDC Alliance MPs added salt to the gaping wound. They had to be punished. To be sure, the MDC made a mess of its succession politics after the death of its founding leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, but the organization had long resolved its internal affairs. It held a congress. Its legitimacy as the main opposition had already been sealed after the 2018 elections when Chamisa amassed over 2 million votes. So what Dr. Magaisa is trying to say is in as much as we have got Dr. Kupe coming in and claiming ownership of the MDC, MDC Alliance. The MDC Alliance on its own is a whole party that stands on its own. Okay, we've got Solomon back. Solo, can you hear me? Solo? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I think we lost connection there. Yes,
right,
I can hear you.
It's okay. It's okay.
I can hear
Maybe we can also.
Hello, I can hear you.
We can continue from where you were.
Okay, so probably what I can say is from our standpoint, the two fundamental issues: the COVID-19 regulations cannot amend the constitution, so that effect is in section 134. So that is part of what we are seeing. It's an attempt to then amend the constitution, but that cannot happen at law. It's inconsistent. So we also looked at the invalidity due to the inconsistency with the constitution in terms of the statutory instruments, the statutory instrument, and the instructions there in the statutory instrument. They are inconsistent with the constitution. So that is the position of ERC. And then also the effect it has on the violation of rights and basic and fundamental freedoms in terms of political rights, rights to representation, rights to participation. So in that regard, again, we see that the statutory instrument is in violation. So the public health itself cannot be used as a reason. It's not a valid reason. So when you look at section 86, which they are actually using, it doesn't apply in this particular regard. Probably if they used another mechanism, going to court or something like that, that could have yet a better standing in terms of its acceptability at law and its respect of the constitution, especially the constitutional democracy, the values of that are supposed to be respected in a constitutional democracy. So I think that those are some of the submissions that I wanted to make.
All right, from a democracy and peace point of view, let me give an example of Malawi. We saw what happened in Malawi when their government was trying to stop the elections, citing COVID. The people took to the streets. And here in Zimbabwe, it's the same thing that's happening. And we've had a lot of opposition parties coming and castigating the move. And we've also CSOs like yours coming through, right? What does this do now to the democracy of the country and the peaceful nature that this country has been witnessing in the past few months?
Okay. So what this does is it stifles the voices of the citizens. It tries to muzzle those probably that would want to participate. It closes the space for participation in the governance of the country. And that is part of what our constitution provides. Citizens have a right to demand that any law that is not that is inconsistent with the provisions, or any act or any practice that is inconsistent with the constitution, they can take it upon themselves to litigate, to advocate, to engage with the authorities to say, okay, you did this, but this is not the appropriate way to handle the. Of course, we know that we have a new normal that we are supposed to live with. So why can't we use the policy that's recently shared with the stakeholders, shared with the citizens, to ensure that we hold our elections, we elect our leaders, because those constituencies, those local authorities, they require those members of parliament, they require those councillors. For instance, at this particular point in time, all the local authorities are having budget consultations across the country. So if a ward, for instance, does not have a representative in the local authority who is going to speak on behalf of the people that elected that particular ward, that is a councillor who is late, or that councillor who was recalled, or that councillor who was suspended for whatever reason, or that MP who was recalled, who is going to represent those people in the institution, in the platforms where decisions are being made. For instance, the national budget consultations that are taking place, there are constituencies that are not represented in parliament. Who is going to take their concerns into parliament? So, for instance, if a vacant fell sometime in March, if a vacant fell sometime in February, up to now, it means we are almost 7 months with that constituency without representation. What does that mean to our representative democracy? It is simply crushing the ideals of that function of representative democracy. That good governance aspect is no longer there. Those constituencies have no representation in parliament, in local authorities, in whatever area that has been actually indefinitely suspended by the statutory instrument.
All right. Speaking about those areas whose MPs, whose councillors have been recalled, some have died, unfortunately. So what happens now to those communities? Who represents them going forward? Now that we have got elections suspended, what happens? Are we going to wait for 2023? Are we going to see a commission? What are the legal things that happen along the way?
Okay, so in terms of representation, in this way, unless if there is another illegality that is going to be created again, but there is no way that a member of parliament is going to go to the National Assembly and sit without necessarily being elected. If you are sitting in the National Assembly, not through proportional representation or the quota system, you have to get a direct vote from the constituencies. You have to get a direct vote from the local authorities. So in that way, there is no way they should be represented unless if there is another illegality that is going to be created along the way. But according to the rules, according to the laws, according to the practices, if you are supposed to sit in the National Assembly representing a constituency in Zimbabwe, you have to be elected directly by a voter in that particular constituency or in that particular locality, which is a local authority ward. So in this case, there is no other way that those areas will get a representative in parliament. We have to go for the elections. That's the only way that those communities can get representation.
But then COVID is here to stay. You look at the numbers. Of course, we've got, like last night, we had, I think, more than 1,000 recoveries, and now the recovery rate stands at 95%, but we still have new cases coming up, right? And that means we are nowhere near the end of COVID. And these communities need someone to represent them. And if they are not represented, then that means there's no development. So are we not seeing another aspect of probably stifling development in areas, in communities where people now will lag behind? Not that there was meaningful development going on, but something was going on. What happens now from here?
Okay, so what I would probably say is going by the provisions of the law, going by practices, communities, citizens themselves can take it upon themselves to litigate against this, take this issue to court, because they are the ones that do not have a representative at this particular point in time. The Constitution gives a time frame within 90 days of the vacant having been announced, the vacant having been notified. Those communities must have representation. So in that regard, it is upon the citizens, it is upon those people in those constituencies, in those wards, to take it upon themselves to say, okay, we want a representative, we are demanding. So this can be through the courts, this can be through engaging with the authorities, that with the Electoral Commission, engaging with the executive. Those platforms are there. Those platforms are supposed to be functioning so that they can be represented, because there's no other way that they can have a representative without necessarily taking those routes. So it's the route that that is available for them is to then say, okay, can we approach the courts? Because they are looking for administrative justice that they are looking for. And then the only way they can get it is through the courts, is through the engagement, through continued engagement with the policymakers, through engagement with those in authority. The Electoral Commission itself must know, the Parliament itself must know, because the role of Parliament, the responsibilities of Parliament in terms of lawmaking are the ones that are actually being suspended by the, infringed upon by the statutory instrument, because it is going against the provisions of the Constitution, which is a product of the lawmaking function of Parliament. So in that regard, it is the citizens themselves who must take it upon themselves to say, we don't have a representative in this particular constituency, in this particular ward, suit up with the authorities. We are taking it to court for the court to give us a verdict in terms of what is justifiable.
Mm-hmm.
Is this justifiable to suspend all these rights? Okay.
Okay, maybe for the benefit of some community members who might be listening right now and whose MPs or councillors are no longer there, which courts do they approach, and what are the legal processes for them to approach the courts?
Okay, so what I would probably say is there are organizations that support the litigation function. I think quite a number of organizations. I'll be quick to mention Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association. Those organizations can actually even assist those citizens who want to take it upon themselves. Even institutions, organizations like the Election Resource Center can actually even facilitate the gathering of the information that they want to take through to those organizations. So you have your women's organizations, youth organizations, church-based, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations. Those are structures that are closer to the people that they can actually utilize to take these issues to the courts of Zimbabwe. So because they need to approach the High Court of Zimbabwe with that so that they can seek an order that will probably set aside the statutory instrument. And then the order must be very clear in terms of what the citizens are seeking. One probably is to seek to ensure that ZEC remains an independent commission that can discharge its duties without the interference of the executive or without the interference of anyone. Because at any other point in time, it means we are going to see a lot of other people coming in to say, we are suspending the functions of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, we are suspending the functions of this particular commission. So in that regard, citizens can undertake what they call class action, citizen action. Those are processes that are actually driven by the citizens themselves to say, we are interested in this. This is an implication in terms of our enjoyment of the rights that are provided for in the Bill of Rights, which is chapter 4 of the Constitution. So in that regard, the citizens themselves have a role to play. And that role is very clear. It is provided for at law. There is nothing amiss about them taking it to the High Court of Zimbabwe through those organizations, through their own lawyers, through their individuals in collective with others, so they can do that as citizens. Even petitioning Parliament to say, are you quiet when your lawmaking function is being curtailed? Why are you leaving the commission to be under the authority and guidance? So these are provisions that are there in the Constitution. It's legal. It's supported for by the Constitution, because that's what democracy provides for. If you feel that you are infringed, you can approach the court.
Okay, your role as CSOs in this war setup, in this thing that we have right now. What is your role, and what have you done since the elections were suspended by VP Chwenga?
Okay, so I think the role of the CSOs, I think it would vary according to the mandate of the organization concerned. But one of the critical roles that we are playing is to act. So when we see something like this does not improve the electoral playing field. This does not improve the electoral environment. This does not improve the legal framework for elections, because it is reflecting badly in terms of the independence of the Electoral Commission. We provide oversight in the sense that we have to look at what the different layers of governance is actually doing. So this is the role of the CSOs. The CSOs has a role to play in terms of building the capacity of the citizens, providing citizens with this information. What we are doing now is we are providing information to the citizens to say, this is the action that we can actually take. This is the legal advice. This is the legal opinion. This is what is provided for in the international, in terms of international best practice if something like this happens. So these roles vary in terms of the nature and the mandate of the organization. But broadly, those are the roles: supporting, coming in to provide where probably state institutions, where government itself, where authorities are failing to provide, and then providing that oversight. So this is important to us. So part of the legal opinion that we've discussed is part of what we have been doing around the issuing of the statutory instrument to then say, this is not legal. How then do we move forward? So this advocacy, this type of litigation is what we are actually undertaking going forward to ensure that elections or the rights of the citizens are not trampled upon by probably those in authority, by individuals, by institutions, by anyone else.
All right. Do you believe the government has got what it takes to listen to your concerns on behalf of the citizens?
I think it's important to highlight that all the other interventions, all the other engagements, they've been listening. In other instances, we have been getting feedback. We have been meeting with different portfolio committees. So in that regard, we feel that once we also speak, they will be also able to listen to us. So it is important that we continue to speak. Whether they listen, we should never find ourselves keeping quiet, especially when things like some of these things happen. We have to continuously speak. We have to continuously provide information. We have to continuously look for the best practices, look for new information, provide alternatives, provide solutions. So part of the COVID policy by ZEC is part of what is coming from CSOs and citizens and the Electoral Commission itself. It's part of the solution. It was a solution to the problem of COVID. Yet the statutory instrument is not a solution to anything. It's just a closure of space. It's just a closure of the voice of the citizen in democracy and in participation in governance.
All right, probably one last thing. Since VP Chwenga announced the suspension, right, we have seen the MDC-T led by Thokozani Kupe announcing that it will go for its extraordinary Congress, I think end of this month, if I'm not mistaken, or in November. And then we've seen the ZANU-PF party holding primary elections in various wards. What does this now do in as far as confidence in the governance system is concerned?
I think it's in terms of political participation, those institutions are allowed to carry out their internal functions, probably to do their own internal activities, be it the congresses, the primary elections, the campaigns, the mobilization. They are entitled to that because that's in Section 67, the political rights. It's covered there. So in that regard, we are saying if those institutions that are individuals to these elections can actually even carry out their own activities separately, what stops the Electoral Commission from doing or from running by-elections that are specific to a particular community, that are specific to a particular polling station. A particular polling station might even, other polling stations, you might find 200 people turning up for an election. So in terms of the policy of ZEC, it means that election can actually be administered, because ZEC can then stagger even those who vote. So it is a picture. Individual activities without the interference of the statutory instrument. The statutory instrument is actually trampling upon the rights of the citizens, because those people that are undertaking their extraordinary congress, the primary elections, those who are doing mobilization, they want to go for an election. That's the signal that is.
Okay, I think we also have lost Solomon for the second time now, but I think we're almost done with the program because I asked him the last question. And what was left probably with the salutations.
But those political parties.
Solo? Okay, I think we'll end it here. It's been an informative program. We had Solomon Bobosibunu with the Senior Programs Officer with Election Resource Center, an election watchdog. They deal with election, they work in tandem with constitutional provisions, they work with SEC, they work with government, they work with the people. So he was just giving us the legal know-how of how we can go about this. Okay, let me just add him. He's back. Solo, yes, we're just about to wrap up. Solo. All right, he's gone. All right, that's been the program, the first installment of Meet the Press with Lovejoy Mtungwiza, and we'll be doing a lot of these programs in the near future. Catch us probably on Tuesday and Thursdays, where we invite everyone from everywhere to share their stories. If you've got a story, if you've got something that you need us to talk to you about, please invite us, get in touch with us on our social media platforms. That's 263 Chat on Twitter. Facebook is 263 Chat, and you can watch this and other broadcasts on our various multimedia platforms, that is on YouTube. You can also watch on Facebook, and you can watch on our Instagram platforms, and all the handles are at 263 Chat. And you can also visit my Facebook page, my Twitter for more of these and other interactive sessions. And that leads me to thank you all for tuning in, and let's make a date next time.